Okay. Let me get back to my slideshow. Is that screen sharing? I don't think it is. Yeah. Share screen. Okay. Rightio. Well, welcome everybody. My name's Jackie, for those of you that don't know me, and I'm joined today by Dr. Darryl Hardie, who will be giving us a lovely guest talk later on in the show. So this is our spring EDN wrap-up webinar for CitrusWatch. Some of you are part of that, part of our volunteer group, but welcome to everyone who's joined us from outside of CitrusWatch. On that PowerPoint slide, there we go. There we go. So a little bit about CitrusWatch. We are a collaborative project joined by Horn Innovation, Plant Health Australia, Northern Territory Government, Citrus Australia, who I work for, and Caesar Australia. We are a project based around surveillance for exotic citrus pests and diseases, and education and engagement. We're industry funded, and this project covers a national base. So myself, I'm the Southern Region Urban Biosecurity Coordinator, and my colleague who works for the NT Gov manages the northern half. Most of you have come here via our EDN, or our Early Detector Network volunteer base, which we run sticky trap surveillance for our pest, the Asian citrus psyllids that we are monitoring for. So here's a couple of pictures of our primary objectives, which are the Asian citrus psyllid, the African citrus psyllid, and glassy wing sharpshooter, and some of the diseases that they are vectors for, which is HLB, hornworm bean disease, and Xylella, as well as citrus canker, which some of you may have heard of. We have had a couple of incursions of that in recent years. You can see on our little map there, our division of the northern and southern region. The EDN, we roll out sticky traps to urban households, as well as industry, twice a year for autumn and spring. So we're just wrapping up the spring trapping program now, which ran in October, and we'll be running our next one in autumn, which is coming up in April next year. This is our third year running, and we are delighted to say that we have not detected any citrus psyllids so far, and we would love to keep it that way. So a little bit of an update on our numbers. So in spring, in the southern region, we deployed 266 traps in urban backyards, as well as public areas, parks, community gardens, education spaces, and also resource recovery facilities. So green waste, council depots and things like that. As you can see, we've got a reasonable distribution across Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, WA. We are looking to recruit more volunteers in South Australia. Those of you that have been with us for a few years will notice we've had quite a bit of a bump in WA. That's actually part of a bit of a campaign that we've run this year with working with DPIRD and a number of our media partners. We've run some podcasts, done some radio spots, and also with the help of Dr. Hardie here, we've managed to recruit quite a few volunteers in WA. So it was quite successful. We're very happy about that. Coming up next year, you can find us at a few more garden shows. These are the dates that I've got confirmed so far. That's the Melbourne International Flowering Garden Show, Perth Garden Show, and the Queensland Garden Show. There will be more events where you'll find us later down the track as I confirm numbers. But if you happen to be at any of these events, feel free to come and say hello or have a chat. And of course, online you'll find us at these websites. our CitrusWatch website, as well as our Instagram posts, and this recording, as well as previous recordings, will also be on YouTube as well, which you can have a look at your leisure. So on to the main part of our webinar today, and that's Dr. Darryl Hardie. So welcome, Dr. Hardie. He's here to talk to us about some summer citrus pests in your garden.
Thanks very much, Jackie. So today, yeah, we might go to the next slide. I think they've seen enough of my dial on the slide. We're just going. I'm going to concentrate just briefly on citrus gall wasps. Just give a bit of a wrap up where it is at the moment, and then we'll concentrate mainly on fruit fly today. So, next slide, thank you. And again. So, what is it? Friday. So I think it was the Wednesday or Tuesday this week, I went out to my garden and had a look at the Lisbon lemon. And as you can see on the left there, the galls are emerging. The wasps are emerging from the galls, I mean. And you'll see there's a response from the tree as well. It's putting out an exudae there to actually try and heal the wound and smother the invaders. So that's the tree fighting back, so that's pretty good. I don't have a lot of galls in this tree, and it may be just the tree might be quite resilient to them. It might be because there's not a lot of citrus gall wasp around, because it's not a lot of other trees close by. I do prune them out when I can. It's getting a big tree now, so I'm going to have to prune it right back to actually keep it under control. And I do spray for citrus leaf miner there, so I use oils, and the oils may deter egg laying of the citrus gall wasp, even though it's not registered for that that pest. It may seem to work. Now the right-hand photo is actually just a picture of the upper canopy there, just one of the stems, main stems. And as you can see, you might be able to see some chewing on the leaves, and that's actually Valenga, which is a large native grasshopper in the West here, and it's actually come to Perth with climate warming, and it's actually loves lemons and a whole pile of other things. Even chews up the avocado in the backyard as well. But and it's got some citrus leaf miner there as well. But you'll notice the main thing on it show is I've got lemons there, which is good. But right at the tip, you can see a little bit of red foliage. That's the only growth I'm having this spring. Okay, so that's because I haven't fertilized. So what I'm doing is restricting the egg-laying sites for the wasps that have merged and mated from that gall close by. So the whole trick is to minimize the sites and have pruned out the majority of the galls before they emerge. So we recommend in Western Australia around June. Now it changes, depends on what state you are, but early, if you can get the galls out early as they're forming, all the better. So we'll go to the next slide. Thanks, Jackie. Now, you'll notice here, this is the predictor, and that's actually the web URL for it there. You can actually use that, and it has a number of sites around Australia. So I've picked Perth and also picked Griffith in New South Wales there, and I've highlighted a couple of areas. So the adult emergence in Perth is actually finished on around about the 1st of November. That's when it's predicted. So it's all emergence is over now. So there's mating and egg laying. So as I said earlier, this by not fertilizing the plant in spring, I'm restricting the sites for egg laying. You can see in Griffith, it's not available. It says the finish of adult emergence, and that's because it's probably still emerging. It's a different climatic region, but you could say by certainly the end of this month or early December, they've all emerged, they're mated, they'll be laying eggs. It's a very short life cycle. The adults live a very short time, so they'll be all gone by Christmas. So after Christmas, that's when you need to focus on your fertilizing and your I forgot my train of thought, that fertilizing and pruning of the galls out. So let's go to the next slide, Jackie. Right, so this is just a general one. This is based on West Australian data, but it's similar. So on the left, we have the the life cycle, gives you a bit more information. And on the right, you can see under management, which is the fourth column, fourth row down, it says best time to prune. So on the first column, it says citrus tree growth stage. So we have there the summer flush and the autumn leaf flush. So now we've starved the spring leaf flush. So we want to get the tree to grow and we want it to fruit. So this is where we need to get some fertilizer on. So from just after Christmas, let's get into some fertilizing, and then into autumn, we'll can fertilize again and get an autumn flush as well. So you can still get 2 flushes. They won't be the main flush like you usually get in spring, but we'll still get 2 flushes. And just next time is, well, the galls will be forming from the eggs laid now up to Christmas and a bit after Christmas. So the best time to prune as the galls are forming. You won't be able to prune before you can see them. But yeah, certainly from February right through to the beginning of winter is the best time to protect your tree from fall gall formation. Okay, let's go to the next one. So that was just wrapping up citrus gall wasp, which in the last seminar we spent a lot of time on. So this time we'll go into a bit of, everybody wants to know about fruit fly. Now, well, the one good news is about citrus is it's not what I'd class as highly susceptible to fruit fly. It varies now. And people go, well, what fruit fly is going to attack my citrus? So the 2 main species we have in the West, and it's in Western Australia, you have the Mediterranean fruit fly, and on the East Coast, we have the Queensland fruit fly. Now, this chart I found on an ABC news site that was, it got pushed to me this week. So it's a DAF supplied, chart. Now, Rowan from Plant Biosecurity Australia is listening to this. You might want to tell your colleagues in DAF that they've got their little chart wrong. So it says absence of Mediterranean fruit fly and that all Q flies on the East Coast. They haven't shown there that Q fly is in Alice Springs. And the other thing that I picked up on with the crosses in the Torres Strait, it's got exotic fruit fly surveillance. Well, that's true. There is exotic fruit fly surveillance there, and there's a big program. But all the states and territories also do surveillance for exotic fruit flies. So they need to be, if you want to get the chart perfect, we need to have crosses around in the other states as well. But apart from that, it's a fairly good representation of what's going on. So basically, in the West, we have Mediterranean fruit fly, and in the East Coast and the North and right down into Victoria, we have Queensland fruit fly. Now, Queensland fruit fly has spread from its native range from the 1870s onwards down from Queensland, now the rainforest, and it spread right down the coast. And it's been around for a long time. It used to be controlled by government in Victoria, and they just weren't being able to get on top of it. So it's actually evolved to industry now to control it. But what's happened when they've done that is that it's allowed the fruit fly numbers to build up outside of orchards and things like that. So it's putting a lot of pressure into South Australia now. And you can see there that it's moving right out towards the South Australian border, and their pest-free area there, the little green area, which is the Riverland, that's actually having multiple incursions. And I think the article said they've had over 50 incursions into South Australia this year. And that's and also they'll get incursions of medfly in people, tourists and travellers will carry fruit by airlines and car and train. And occasionally they get outbreaks of medfly in Adelaide as well. So it's an ongoing struggle to keep fruit fly out of South Australia and to limit its impact in other production areas. So if you're doing your little bit in a semi-rural area, or you're close to industry and you're controlling fruit fly in your backyard, you're protecting the industry as well. We might go to the next slide. Thanks, Jackie. Now, as I said, there's a lot of surveillance going around, and this is a surveillance, a Linfield trap, this type. I'll talk a bit more about it at the end of the talk. I actually have an example that's been provided by DPIRD, so I'll go through a bit more. But I just wanted to put it here now is because I ran the surveillance program in Western Australia for many years, and we used to find about 5% of our traps disappeared all the time. And it took me years to work out what was going on, but people would see these government traps out there with these, and they'd go, well, these are really good fruit fly traps. I might just grab this one, they'll replace it, and it'll be okay, and I'll put it in my backyard. These traps are designed for surveillance, not for controlling of fruit fly. So the people that were taking and putting in the backyards, and probably still do, they're wasting their time. These ones only attract males. I'll talk a little bit more about them later. But yeah, please do not relocate these traps to your property. There's far better ways to control fruit fly. Next slide, please. So back in about 2015, the good old chemicals in the good old days, the labasids and the dimethoates were withdrawn from use in Australia. There was a big pushback from industry, but they still went because of the human health risk. They were reassessed as being an issue. And of course, since then, fruit fly has become a real topical issue, because in the good old days, you just need to put on a couple of sprays of something like labacid, which was, as it says there, by systemic effect. So what that mean was the chemical was coated on the fruit from the spray, and it would penetrate the surface of the skin, and any eggs that were laid there would actually die and not hatch. So the fruit flies were controlled. So it was just simple 2 sprays, one about a month before picking and one about 2 weeks before picking. Because they were systemic, the chemicals didn't break down as quick as the modern chemicals, which are contact chemicals and surface chemicals. And that's the problem. They stayed in the fruit. And when they started looking at the effects on children, they saw potential issues with toxicity, acute toxicity to children under 2 if they ate, say, a dozen cherry tomatoes or a dozen strawberries. So that's why they were withdrawn. We're the second last country in the world, and the last industrial, or what you would call an OECD country, to actually remove labacid. So yeah, so it's gone, and so the good old days are gone. So we have to have more an integrated approach towards fruit fly control, which is what I'll talk about now. Thanks. Right, so basically it's not simply 1 or 2 sprays anymore. You need to go through at least some of these steps to control fruit fly. So there's exclusion, bait application, and I'll reinforce straight away, bait application is not baits, it's not spraying, it's large droplets onto the plant to control the fruit fly, because the bait will dry out. Sprays dry out, and if it's a bait put on as a spray, it dries out and it's not effective once it dries out. That's why you want the large droplets. Of course, there's hygiene and sanitation, and lure and kill. Thank you. Right, so exclusion, and a lot of people are using this for prize fruit. So if you've got a mango tree with only 50 mangoes in it, and the mango tree is not too big, even if it is too big, and you can't get to all the mangoes, but you can get to 25 of the 50 mangoes, where you can bag them. There's lots of different things they use for bagging. Some are more effective than others. You can buy commercial bags, you can get commercial netting. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. The mesh bags, mesh sleeves, mosquito netting works, shade cloth, nylon, and fly screens. Now, they're all there to stop the fruit fly in this situation from actually laying eggs on the fruit. The problem with some of these bags is that if they're put tightly around the fruit, then there's no distance between the fruit and the bag. So the fruit fly can still sit on the outside of the bag and lay eggs directly into the fruit. So you want the bag area to be bigger than the actual fruit. So there's a space longer than about 3 or 4 millimeters, which is the length of the ovipositor. So it can't actually contact the fruit. Okay, next please. So as I said, some people get right into it. So these bags, they go on before the fruit becomes susceptible to stinging, which is usually, while it's hard green, it's not susceptible to stinging. Q-fly can, in some fruit types, sting fruit when it's a little bit harder than medfly. Medfly is not as able to sting the harder fruit. It has to wait for the fruit to ripen a little bit more. And there's things like if you avocados, they're not seen as a host for medfly, and they're doing some work now on Q-fly, and that might be happening too. If they're picked hard green. So there's a thing, if you pick avocados hard green and let them ripen in your fruit bowl, then you won't have a problem with fruit fly. But if you let them tree ripen, and it takes a long time for avocados to ripen on the tree, it's a good way of keeping the fruit. So it's not all, you need it all at once. you just let it you just leave it on the tree longer. But if it starts to ripen, they become susceptible to fruit fly. Okay, so hard green state does protect fruit flies as well. As you can see, these bags are a lot bigger than the fruit, so most of the fruit will be protected. Next, thank you. Right, now on the right-hand side, we see something that's netted off an entire, what looks like an area with maybe one tree or a couple of trees in there. Now this works, but this isn't the best way. The best way is actually to do it as you see on the left-hand side, where the gentleman there has tied the fruit off, tied the bag off at the base. Okay, so the idea of that is that any pupae that are in the ground, because that's one of the life stages, the larvae jump out of the fruit from the previous season and they land on the ground, they crawl into the soil, pupate, and they stay there until conditions are right for them to emerge. Now, if there's still fruit on that tree and emerges, and you've got the actual bag that's down to the ground, the flies simply fly up inside the bag and you haven't protected the fruit. Whereas if you tie it around the trunk, they actually can't get in to the actual fruit anymore. And the other thing is you need to put these bags, like the small bags, on before the fruit's susceptible. You don't leave it on all the time. It'll cut down the airflow and you'll get mildew problems potentially, and also you'll get less photosynthetic development because or action because of the shading from the actual nets. So netting is very effective. If you're in a high fruit fly zone, if you're trying to grow something like peaches in suburban areas, they're highly susceptible to fruit fly. But citrus, less susceptible, and things like grapefruit may be worthwhile bagging. Mandarins, depends on the variety and that, but they can sometimes ripen when there's not a lot of fruit fly around, so they're less susceptible. And certainly if you want to go for the gold standard in fruit fly, if you grow a Eureka lemon, you're very unlikely to have fruit fly issues. But the more susceptible things, some of the grapefruit, some of the mandarins, and some of the other thinner skinned citrus, they can be attacked. Okay. Right, so number 2 is bait application. Now, bait application, I'll talk a little bit, we'll see a bit more about shortly, but just basically it's very short-lived because the chemicals that are used in are very short-lived chemicals, because we don't want any residual issues like we have with the labaces and the dimethoates. They're basically a chemical mixed with a bait to attract the fly, and you need to put them on in large droplets. Like I said before, I'm going to reinforce the large droplets, because once they dry out, they become ineffective. And what happens when you put a large droplet on is that when you get the humidity overnight and also dews and things like that, they reabsorb the water and reactivate. So they dry out during the day and reactivate overnight if you had large droplets. And that makes them, the fruit fly, interested in them. The other thing is that these baits are easily washed off by heavy rain or overhead irrigation. And if you're hit by heavy rain, you need to reapply the bait. And overhead irrigation, yes, you need to change your sprinkler system if you've got fruit fly susceptible trees. You go to drippers or something like that, so you're not having the issue of you put the bait on and then the next day you wash it off. So reapply up to 7 days, every 7 days. Some people in some areas have found that they need to reapply the bait more often than that. And I have heard of some growers in some situations who apply the bait twice a week. And up to 14 days post-harvest. What that will encourage is stopping the fruit fly moving from one host plant to another host plant. Now, the interesting thing about citrus is that you could have an orchard full of peach trees and several citrus based around your homestead. So I'm just using this as an example. Now, the fruit fly don't like hanging around in the peach trees except when there's peaches on there and they're laying the eggs. They love citrus. So they'll actually roost in the citrus. They fly back they go and lay their eggs in the peaches, and they fly back to the citrus even if there's no fruit on it, and they'll sit there. So citrus is a really good one that if you've got an orchard, you don't want citrus close by if you're growing susceptible things like summer fruit and things like that. But in your backyard, it's a mecca for fruit flies. So even if there's no fruit in your tree, they'll hang around there. So baiting even when you haven't got a lot of fruit on your citrus, but got fruit on other crops in your backyard, is well worthwhile. Okay, as I mentioned, baiting may not be effective in urban areas where there are high populations and constant reinvasions, because you might do all the right things, but if your neighbours don't, then you're up for reinfestation. Now, there's differences between medfly and Q-fly. Now, I'm concentrating these two fruit fly species. There's several hundred fruit fly species in Australia, but only 4 or 5 that actually attack domestic produce. So, but the 2 main ones are Q-fly and medfly. So medfly is a lazy flyer. It will not move more than about 50 meters in a generation unless it has to. It will just stay in the area. Whereas Q-fly is a very mobile, large, robust species. It'll travel large distances. Medfly will try and travel through an orchard to the next orchard, or through your backyard to tree, but from host tree to host tree. Whereas Q-fly has been found, it'll travel through native vegetation, eucalypt forest, no problems. It'll actually roost there overnight and then continue on its trek to find more hosts. So it's well adapted. It is a native, and it's adapted to the Australian landscape. Okay, next. So bait application. So not everybody has huge fancy bait applicators and things like that. So these days it's rather limited on what you can use. I've actually went to the APVMA website, and because I just wanted to check, because it's a state of flux here. You never know what's been removed from the website and what's no longer available. One of the ones I looked at was Eco Naturo Lure, and I can't find that anymore. People aren't selling it, so I think that one's been discontinued. And the bait that's got spinosad in it is now called Nature's Way, and there's a Yates product. That's the one you can get for your backyard. It's quite expensive to use. Now, the other way to do it is mix your own bait up. You can buy something like Animed there on the bottom, which is a very good bait. There are lots of baits out there, but I just put Animed there. I'm not saying you have to use that one. That's a very good bait. And it's mixed with something like the David Gray's Fruit Fly Garden Spray, which is the active ingredient in that is malathion, as you can see in the first. And that's an OP, organophosphate. And it has a very short life. If you follow the instructions, I forget what the withholding period is. It's probably less than a week, or a week to 10 days, something like that. So it's very effective, very short withholding period. You can also get DPIRD or Leopardex. I did find that still registered. That doesn't seem to be used as much. There's some people that swear by it, but it's usually malathion. So the 2 options you have are to make your own bait up with an OP, or buy Nature's Way, which has spinosad in it. Now, you can get spinosad these days. You can buy it as a standalone chemical, but it's not registered for you to mix the bait. That's all I'm going to say on that. It's not registered for you to mix the bait, and it's quite expensive. Okay, so it's up to you whether you want to go green, which Nature's Way is, or use an OP, which is cheaper, and mix your own bait. Okay, so for those people that don't want to even buy the Animed or something similar to a bait, you can actually mix. You just need a water and protein, so you can actually use something like Vegemite or sugar, and mix that with Leopardex or DPIRD, and or with malathion. So you can actually keep the price even further down. You just need a protein. The protein attracts the females especially, and they use the protein, they digest it and use that to develop their eggs. So that's why they're attracted to it. But it also attracts the males too. So there, so the pre-mixed ones with spinosad, like the Nature's Way, you just dilute with water, and people go, well, how do I get it onto the plant? So coarse droplets, as I said, you've got to get those droplets, and best not to target the fruit, and the best sites are underneath the leaves. So spray it from underneath it. Now you can just get a bucket and fill it up in a bucket, and get a large paintbrush, and dip the paintbrush in and flick it on the tree. You get large droplets that way. You can use a pump pack and put it on coarse, or you can use one of those little squirt bottles and put on coarse. I've found the paintbrush works best for me if I want to protect a tree. You don't need, it's easy to clean up the paintbrush, and it's easy to put into a bucket and mix it up. So bait application. And the thing about bait application, while the fruit's susceptible, you've got to do it every 7 to 10 days. Okay. And if you've got a number of different citrus and they're all ripening at different times, so that extends the period out. So you might be actually putting on bait for up to 3 months, depending on what you've got in your little mini orchard or your semi-rural block or whatever you've got. Of course, if you've got a semi-rural block and you've got 40 or 50 fruit trees, you don't want to be wandering around with a paintbrush and a bucket. You need something a bit bigger, or as my uncle has done, he's actually put all his trees close to the house and he's built a big enclosure and he just walks in. So he's gone from just putting a net over single trees. He's actually built an enclosure and planted his new fruit trees inside there, and he keeps them pruned quite tight, and he's got everything at his back doorstep. So yeah, he's not bad for a 90-year-old. All right, next. Okay, so hygiene is very important, sanitation. This alone will not solve your fruit fly problem, but it stops your fruit fly problem getting worse. But once you bag something, you need to solarize it before you bin it to kill the fruit fly. The weather's warming up, so you can actually just put it on. The best stuff to put it on is on concrete. That heats up and heats the bag up, and in direct sunlight. That's what I do. And yeah, another trick is for sanitation is, apart from picking up the fruit, is remove unwanted hosts. In Western Australia, and it's probably similar on the east, there's always species that kickstart the fruit fly population out of winter. And in Western Australia, especially in the Perth metropolitan area, it's locusts. They're the first fruits to ripen as the fruit fly are emerging from the pupal case in the soil after winter, early spring, and coming out. They're mating, looking for protein sources to develop their eggs, and they're looking for a host. And the first one is locusts. And they love locusts, and they generate thousands and thousands of fruit flies. So those thousands of fruit flies move quickly on to the next thing in your garden, which could be citrus. It could be coming up to Christmas now. You start to get summer fruit, peaches, nectarines, apricots, those sorts of things. And then after Christmas, you'll get, they'll be moving across into things like pome fruit, and you'll see a lot of small apple trees, you'll see apple trees with small apples on them, and they look like they're an asteroid or something. They've got all these dimples on them. So they're fruit fly stings that haven't developed. The pectins are too high in the green small fruit, but the fruit fly are desperate to sting something, so they'll actually sting the fruit. And where it's been stung, it's damaged, so it won't grow at the same rate. So the rest of the fruit grows, and you get these large dimples. Nothing develops in them because it's they're too unripe for the fruit fly to develop. But you get this distorted fruit, and people are used to ring me up all the time saying, "What is it? Have I got a dimpling bug? Have I got this? What's caused this? Is it a nutrient deficiency?" No, you just got fruit fly desperate to sting something. Okay, so pick up all your fallen fruit, as you can see. So they're peaches on the ground. Those peaches can generate up to 100 maggots per fruit. So they just lay on the ground. The larvae jump out or crawl to the surface and jump out, crawl away, find a nice dry spot, pupate. Over summer period, they may take 10 days or less. If they're in a shady area, maybe a bit longer. And then they're out and about mating, and then they're looking for the next feed. And there's a lot of citrus ripening over the Christmas period, and they will be, if they're susceptible types, they will be hammered by the fruit fly that move out of these peaches. Now, the other thing with peaches is that once upon a time, they were strictly, you only got them sort of like around Christmas, but nowadays they've got varieties that will go through from October, end of October, right through. You can get varieties that fill the niche right through to the end of May now and into June. So peaches are available, different varieties, for 6 months of the year. So these peaches generate massive numbers of fruit fly if they're not tended to properly. So they're just like locusts in that case, that they generate large populations. Thank you. Next one. Okay, so the next way of doing this is quite effective, and a lot of citrus, this is probably all you need to do. It's just mass trapping and lure and kill. Now this is a commercial one. This is a biotrap trap, and it's actually a liquid trap. I've got one here. I'll demonstrate it at the end how it works. But down below, you can see in the liquid, the flies have got into it, and you can see a number of medfly floating around in the juice. They've drowned themselves in the soup looking for protein. Now, right in the middle, there's one fly that's actually its wing. It looks like it's diving. It's got its wings straight out across its body. There's not Medelta form. It's straight down, and it's a bit dark than the others. That's not a fruit fly. That's actually a signal fly. So other fly species that aren't fruit fly are attracted to these traps as well. So you've got to look closely to see in your trap that you are getting fruit fly, and that's telling you to have a close look at your tree that there are fruit fly active. So this time of year, I'd start to see in the last month or so, you start to see these sorts of traps catching fruit fly. And what you need to do is change the liquid every few weeks, because once it gets a lot of flies in there, they start going a bit yucky, and they start attracting other flies like bush flies and house flies and green bottle flies, and some of them lay their eggs in there, so you start getting maggots and that in there as well. So it gets really yucky and smelly. So replace your liquid in these traps about every 2 weeks. So this is a commercial one. And as it says there also, you'll collect ferment flies. Well, they're very small with red eyes as well. So there is a really nasty ferment fly called Suzuki eye, which you don't have in Australia. And there's some surveillance done for that as well. It's the only ferment fly that's a primary species, meaning that it's the only fruit fly, it's the only ferment fly that will attack fruit without another fruit fly or without other damage being there beforehand. So ferment flies that you find in your fruit bowl and things like that, they actually attack things once they've already damaged. But the Suzuki eye, which you don't have in Australia, it's causing lots of issues in the US. It attacks the fruit without prior damage. Thank you. All right, so here we have examples of homemade traps and what you can do. So, and then some how to make them and how to utilize them. Now, what I'll tell you here is they don't have to round hole that, but you can use a little hole punch, or you can use a little hole cutter to do it. But what you want the edges to be is nice and smooth, and you don't want the holes too big, because if the holes are too big, then the actual flies will find their way out of there before they fall into the liquid and drown. So you want, if you cut them roughly, you need to sandpaper them so nice and smooth. The one on the right is actually a flap. It's not actually a hole cut in it. So they've actually cut a flap, and you can bend that out and allow access for the fruit fly. So the fumes coming out of the brew will actually attract the fruit fly, and they'll find their way in. And once they get in there, the heat in the trap from the sun, they solarize and then they fall down and drown. Okay, next. Right, so here's a commercial, oh, not a commercial, here's a trap that somebody's made, and looks like they've used a bit of fruit juice in there and household ammonia. So it looks like solution 2. So these are various solutions that people have used and swear by, and we just collected them over the years and had a number of recipes used to hand out. So these are quite available, and I'm sure that Jackie will provide the talk as a PDF if anybody wants it to get this information. It is available on the web. The one thing I'll say about this homemade trap is it looks okay, but the holes are too small. You need larger holes in that trap so the fruit fly can get in there. They don't like going through confined spaces, but the holes, I'm saying, they should be roughly the size of somewhere between a 5 and 10 cent piece. If anybody can remember what a 5 cent piece looks like, of course. Okay, so make the holes a bit bigger and replace the lure every once in a while, every couple of weeks, depending on temperature. But yeah, you want a fresh lure that's giving off fruity odors and things like that to attract them. Thank you. Next. Right, so I've talked about various different methods of controlling fruit fly, and you've got to work out which is best in your situation, whether you're urban, semi-rural, rural, how many trees you have, what mix of trees you have, what fruit flies species are causing you problems, and when they're causing you problems. So there's a few sites here that are listed where you can get traps and that from. And there's also one here that I've used where you can get commercial net makers, and they do all sorts of things like fishing nets and things like that. But you can buy large rolls of net. If you've got lots of trees, you want to bag up, and it's a lot cheaper than buying the existing pre-made nets that are shaped for the trees. You can just buy this on a roll. So there's a number of options there that people might want to investigate, or they want to, if they don't want to make their own traps or lures and things like that. Okay, next one now. All right, so before we take any questions, we're just going to flick back and I'll talk through these traps a bit now. So just got to adjust my screen here a bit. All right, we'll bring these in. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the government, here we go, down here. Actually, I'll pull it up here now a bit. And of course, I'm plugging my pest guide there. So if you've got anything to report apart from finding for CitrusWatch, any other insects you find in your citrus outside of the testing period, just report to my pest guide and the government will get back to you. So here we have a standard Linfield trap. It's actually just a pickle jar that's modified. This one's got stickers on it, tells you, it's got toxin in it. So the government traps, they don't use wet traps. They actually use dry traps, and they use dental wicks, as you can see here. And they're dipped in a lure, like, well, it's not a lure, it's a parapheromone, and it's specific for different fruit fly species. So there's one specific for medfly, which is either tri-med lure, or there's another one that's got an extender in it, which makes it last a bit longer, and it's basically just added with glycerine. And also there's one called Q-lure, which works very well on Q-fly and or other species of Bactrocera too, which are found on the East Coast. So that only attracts the males, and there's thousands of these out there. So the way these ones work is the fly actually goes through the traps hanging up, and the fly, it might be a bit better if I go this way here. So the traps hanging up in the tree with a lid on, and the flies are attracted, and they go through the holes, they land on the holes quite often, and they go inside. And inside there's the lure, but what kills them is this little piece of pest strip that's in there. So that's not to be handled, that's actually got DDDP impregnated in it, and that actually causes like a fumigation effect in the trap, and the flies will die within 5 to 30 seconds depending on the temperature, and that is taken out of the bag and just lays in the bottom of the trap. So it's not for you to chew on or anything, it's in there, it's actually a toxin, and the actual labels will tell you what it is. So there's thousands of these traps around metropolitan areas, rural areas around Australia. Some of them are slightly different. Some states they actually have different coloured lids depending on lure types. Others don't use the pickle jar, they use other jars. In the tropics, they usually use, sometimes in Torres Strait, they use a different trap. It's a lot heavier duty one. It's called pattern trap. It's actually made out of PVC pipe. So there's various incarnations, but they all look the same. They're all dry traps. Whereas for backyarders, such as yourself, just this a little bit better now. Here's one of the commercial available traps. This is a bio trap. This is an old version. The one I showed you in the actual thing was a bio trap 2. This is bio trap 1. This one has holes in the bottom. It's a yellow color, so the yellow does attract fruit flies, and the color, does attract fruit flies. And the holes, notice the size of the holes. I get my little piggy just about inside them. Okay, so that's the size of the holes. This one has 5 holes. You take the lid off, and you can fill it with liquid. This hole in the middle, this one here, it's raised, so you fill up about a few centimeters of your bait or your lure, and one of those recipes, it could be fruit juice, vanilla essence, cloudy ammonia, Vegemite, sugar, molasses, all those sort of sweet, sickly things and proteiny things, even baker's yeast, anything like that. Mix it up in a bottle, keep it in the fridge, and replace it every couple of weeks in here. And just see what fruit fly you're getting. That'll inform you whether you've got fruit fly active, and whether maybe you need to net, or whether you need to change your bait application strategy because it's not working, you're still trapping fruit flies. So these need to be, in the surveillance game, we used to hang these at least 1 metre above the ground, and in the shade, not right to the center of the tree, but on the outer edge of the tree, but still protected, and any leaves around so they don't obstruct the hole, so the flies can fly in freely. They can roost off a little bit, and then they can pick up the plume of scent, and they can come around and they find where it is and they dive in here, and then the heat is generated by the trap, or they just splash into the water, but they'll solarize and fall down. Some do get out, but most of them, that's the end of them. So, and for this one, the BioTrap 2, you can actually, it has a lure or that you can actually buy commercially. Unfortunately, BioTrap didn't get back to me and provide anyone. It's usually a clearer lure. This is an old one. It's gone a bit. It's only kicks for 3 to 6 months. So, but it's got a yeasty sort of fruity smell. Actually, it's more yeasty now than it used to be. It was fruity before that. So, and it's got the instructions on the back. So that's a simple way of trapping. You can buy a trap. The sites I've put on the website there, well, you can see on the previous slide there. There's all different sorts of traps. Every man and his dog has tried to invent a fruit fly trap. They all work about the same. Okay, I think we're just about done there, unless there's any questions.
We do have a question in the chat from Bruce. He asks, do Feijoa host fruit fly?
Yes, they do. Yes, and Feijoa, they're close related to guavas, and guavas are fruit fly just love them. They're up there with locusts. So Feijoas, yeah, you want to pick them if you can a bit before they ripen up on the plant, but they can be very susceptible to fruit fly, indeed. So yeah, I know they're very prolific too. Their production in backyards, you can get hundreds off a plant. So yeah, it just depends where you live, of course. In some situations, they'll absolutely get hammered. In other situations, you might be in a high fruit fly area and you might get away without doing anything to them. But normally, yeah, you need to actually bag your Feijoa if you want to keep them.
Did we have any other questions?
I sent them all to sleep, I think.
I've got a couple of questions just from people that have sent them in to me. One being with prunings from your citrus galls. So if you're pruning your galls between now and the next couple of months, solarizing, how long should they be solarized for?
Yeah, well, this
or under a tarp?
Yeah, it depends on the temperature. But you know, it's 25 degrees outside in Perth today on a piece of concrete. But you know, it's going to cool down. So look, get them in the bag, double bag them, leave them there for a couple of weeks on concrete if you can. Yeah, the longer the better. But in winter you'd have to leave them for a month, and because it's just not hot enough to generate the heat. The other thing is, if you haven't got a lot of galls, stick them in the freezer in a bag. Or, as we saw, I think there was one person who had them on the barbecue. They fired up the barbecue. But as we were discussing earlier, don't keep them as kindling and leave them down the backyard for 3 months, because they're just going to emerge all the same. So yeah, you need to destroy them at some point, either solarizing. But yeah, if it was the middle of summer and it's mid-30s, just 2 or 3 days, a week to be safe. But this time of year around Australia, unless you're up in the tropics or subtropics, you're going to have to leave it for 2 or 3 weeks to really make sure everything's dead in there before you put it in the green waste. Or the other thing is, a lot of people use the one of those mulches now. Just chuck them through that. That works quite well. Just turns them into dust pretty well, vegetable dust.
Okay, any other questions?
Shall we mention the sticky traps? So has anybody noticed that the sticky traps have got a bit of bad press recently? They never used to have cages on them, and I notice people have been asked in the past whether the sticky traps will work as a control measure for citrus gall wasp. Well, they probably will control, but they probably won't do enough control to eradicate or reduce the problem totally. But if you're going to use a sticky trap as part of your approach for citrus gall wasp, then make sure it's definitely got a cage on it. I think just about all traps. I know Bunnings only sell traps now with cages. They used to sell refills. I'm not sure. There was a lot of argy-bargy backwards and forwards with people about what Bunnings are doing, but Bunnings are really good biosecurity focus, so they do the right thing. So I think that's all been sorted.
In some states, we are actually required to put a cage on them now as well. I believe Victoria's enacted that. I'm not sure about New South Wales. Yeah,
the biggest thing, I've seen lizards and I've seen bird feathers, but the biggest thing we caught was a sheep.
A sheep?
Yeah. We're doing, what was it now? Tomato potato psyllid. We're putting traps in rural areas, and somebody plopped one in an organic farm just over the fence, and the sheep rubbed up against it, and the trap and the stick was being dragged around. When they went back, they couldn't find it, and then they saw in the distance this yellow glow on the sheep sort of thing, and it was the trap was stuck to its fleece, and it was wandering around the paddock quite happily with the trap stuck to it.
Well, it's good to hear that no harm came to the sheep.
Yeah, no sheep was harmed in the trapping. Yeah.
One other question that I have received is how effective are cow and clay sprays?
Right, as I mentioned earlier, so the APVMA's website has all the registered products. So if you go there, I'll just tell people about that. And the reason I bring that one up is that, all products that are registered, and I think I can find it now. Yeah, so if you go to the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, and on the front page or the home page, down the bottom, it's got information about registered products. And there's also a permit. So you just click on the registered products one, and it brings up a page setting. And if you just click on pest down and then type in citrus gall wasp, it'll come up with 3 products that are registered, and kale and clay is one of them. Now, I've never used it, mainly because my citrus are all surrounded by brick paving. And if you spray the citrus with that clay, it does sort of stain your pavers temporarily. So I haven't used it. But for something to be registered with the APVMA, it has to be safe in the way that it's prescribed use, and it has to have some efficacy. It doesn't mean that it will kill 99.9% of all the pests that you're targeting, but it has to have some efficacy. And I haven't seen the data behind it. I haven't used it myself, but it will have some impact. But I don't think it's the only measure you should rely on to control citrus gall wasp in your garden.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, we might wrap that up there. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Hardie, for giving us a wonderful talk.
Well, hopefully it's been useful for some people anyway, and that they can get some good quality fruit from their citrus this summer.
So that concludes our spring 2024 surveillance campaign. Our next trapping period will be in autumn, which will be the 1st of April. So anyone that's currently registered as a volunteer, you'll start receiving traps around March. So you'll hear from us you'll have a very wonderful Christmas, and then you'll hear from us around January, February in regards to the next season. Anyone that isn't currently a volunteer, you're more than welcome to opt in. Just have a look at our website, which I've popped in the chat, and it will go into the comments as well once this goes up on YouTube. And you're more than welcome to register. We're very keen to recruit some more volunteers for South Australia in particular, but all states are welcome. So this will be uploaded to YouTube in the next day or two. And thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks, everybody. Hope it was useful.